Turkey has launched its ground offensive against the Kurdish militia, U.S. allies who played a major role in the fight against ISIS. Today, tanks and armored personnel vehicles crossed into the border into Syria just hours after an aerial and artillery assault on several targets in northeastern Syria. The rapid escalation comes only 4 days after President Trump privately greenlighted a, quote, small Turkish incursion in the area. Trump defended his decision earlier today and made a reference to Normandy.
We've been talking to Turkey for 3 years. They've been wanting to do this for many years, as you know. They've been fighting each other for centuries. They've been fighting each other for hundreds of years. This has been going on. We were put into this battle. Kurds are fighting for their land, just so you understand. They didn't help us in the Second World War. They didn't help us with Normandy, as an example.
According to various reports, the Kurdish militia is said to be holding more than 12,000 suspected Islamic State members in 7 prisons. U.S. defense officials told reporters that those Kurdish forces have suspended all operations against the Islamic State. President Trump was asked if he was at all worried about the release of ISIS fighters. Here's what he said.
Steve?
These ISIS fighters escape and pose a threat elsewhere.
Well, they're going to be escaping to Europe. That's where they want to go.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who strongly opposes the president's decision, made an appearance on Trump's favorite morning show, Fox and Friends.
We can't abandon the Kurds now. We can't turn it over to Turkey. To think that will work is really delusional and dangerous. Well, it's a lie that that ISIS has been defeated. The caliphate's been destroyed, but it will reemerge. You know, the Kurds can't fight Turkey and control ISIS at the same time.
Florida Republican Marco Rubio also had a damning assessment of the decision.
To just abandon them like that so the Turks can come in and slaughter them is not just immoral. I mean, it taints our reputation all over the world. They're going to leave to go fight the Turks, and then we're going to have we're going to have a jailbreak and thousands of ISIS fighters out there. So I think it's a terrible mistake. I hope they rethink it.
What would you do?
Well, look, people have to understand the president's the commander-in-chief. He can order these things, but it's a terrible mistake, and, you know, we'll have to see what options there are. I'm sure the Senate will potentially, you know, take some vote that would disagree with that decision. But my hope is that the president will reconsider, because I think this would have implications that go far beyond just Syria.
For more, I'm joined by Kelly Magsamen, Vice President for National Security and International Policy at the Center for American Progress. Kelly, thank you for joining us. Senator Rubio says he hopes that the president will change his mind on this. No indication that that's going to happen, at least in the immediate. If that doesn't happen, these dire predictions, the dire possibilities here of a slaughter of the Kurds, of mass escape of thousands, maybe over 10,000 ISIS prisoners, how likely is that to come to pass?
Well, I think we've already started seeing it. You know, President Trump's impetuous decision has set into motion a series of events, and we're watching it play out as we speak. I think you're likely to see a potential resurgence of ISIS. I think President Trump has essentially sowed the seeds of ISIS 2.0 in this decision. And it's very clear to me that he had no sense of what the potential long-term consequences could be, and no sense of a plan B or contingency plans to deal with the dramatic humanitarian consequences, the dramatic consequences for U.S. interests in the region in the long term.
Again, hearing Rubio, hearing Graham, hearing voices that don't typically criticize the president, criticize this policy in such explicit terms, the possibility is out there, has been floated certainly, that you could have super majorities emerge in Congress, Democratic and Republican super majorities that would be big enough to override any presidential veto, for instance, in terms of imposing sanctions on Turkey if they were to move on the Kurds. Do you see any prospect of that happening?
Well, I certainly think that Congress, first of all, needs to hold members of the administration responsible and accountable to the president's decision. That includes Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Secretary of Defense Mike Esper, Chairman Milley, et cetera. And certainly the Congress should be taking steps to find ways to mitigate the very negative consequences of this decision. Now, the problem is, as Senator Rubio pointed out, the president is the commander-in-chief. He has a large amount of executive power on foreign policy. And unfortunately, this is what happens. I mean, he has made a decision, and now he's going to face the consequences of that decision.
Yes, I guess that's the question. If Congress did act, how much do you think could be mitigated or altered in this in the policy?
Listen, I think the Turks have made a calculation. They clearly blew past the president's warnings or false warnings, I guess. I think that the Congress can certainly impose some serious sanctions on the Turks. Whether that will change how the Turks behave or roll back any of the actions we're seeing right now, I think is probably unlikely. At most, but certainly the Congress needs to take steps to try to hold and lead where the president has not been able to.
The polling has certainly suggested there isn't much of an appetite in this country for U.S. troops to be involved in the Middle East, in Syria. What is the way to get American troops out of Syria without running the risk of what's being described tonight?
Well, what's ironic is that the president's own strategy was actually to work between the U.S. military and the Turks to create some sort of buffer zone and to do it over time and to build confidence. And the president, in this one decision, has essentially upended his whole administration strategy, which had been working. The U.S. military was being very successful at doing joint patrols, for example, with the Turks. There had not been any Kurdish attacks against the Turks on Turkish territory. So things were in place to potentially get to a stage where maybe the United States could hand off the mission to other European forces. But none of those decisions were made. The president, in an impetuous decision on the phone call with Prime Minister Erdogan, made this decision, and now we are where we are.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.